Scott, here at True North, we have a process that we call PTP. What is it?
PTP.
Yes.
PTP is pre-transaction planning.
Okay. What is it? Who is it for?
Sure. So I'll just go back to kind of the genesis, the beginning.
Okay.
We work with a lot of business owners and entrepreneurs, and we, over a long period of time, I don't want to say multiple decades, but probably over the last 15 years, and I think the most acute experience for me was in 2008, 2009, where we started seeing entrepreneurs exit and then really struggle afterwards.
Interesting.
For a lot of different reasons. In 08, 09, the first time that I really observed this, it was a business owner who had done really great with his exit, but then the financial crisis comes, and there's sort of this panic moment of, oh my gosh, now what? I won't go into a lot of detail there, but just that sort of was the first time I really watched an entrepreneur struggle post-transaction. And then over the years since then, kind of watched the movie multiple times, always with a little bit of a different iteration, different things affecting the entrepreneur. And really where I landed was, we're not doing the job that we could be doing, helping these business owners and entrepreneurs plan prior to a transaction. So that's how we got to PTP, or pre-transaction planning. And as we began to study and work on this, and I went through a process to get a designation in the space, and just began to get more involved in the exit planning community. For lack of a better term, we identified 4 pillars, really, that areas that we think the business owner needs to prepare in prior to exiting. And we've kind of simplified it into 2 personal pillars and 2 business pillars that relate directly to the business itself. On the personal side, there's a coaching element, which is really, what's life post-transaction look like? What am I going to do with the rest of my life? What am I going to do with 16 hours a day for the next 20, 30, 40 years, depending on your age and life expectancy? And I think a lot of times, lots of us, not just business owners, but we think we're going to get to this place and then life's going to be amazing. So when we exit a business and we get a pile of money and it's wired into our bank account, and we wake up on day 2, we're like, okay, I'm at the pinnacle. I've accomplished everything I want to accomplish. And then they go out and get their handicap to 2, and they get in shape, and they buy a second home and maybe an airplane, and that's all fun for a season, but then it becomes normal and mundane.
Correct.
As crazy as that sounds. And then, okay, what's the next mountain I'm going to climb, right? And so there's not a lot of forethought into what's life look like post-transaction.
So on the coaching, that's post-transaction coaching on the pre-side.
Right.
But is the coaching also have an element why I'm running my business?
For sure. So, I think part of the challenge for business owners and entrepreneurs is they're so busy running the business. There's so much pulling at them on a day-to-day basis. It's very hard to carve out time to go be still and quiet and think about what's next. Think about these things. And so coaching beforehand, some discipline around coaching, some accountability with the coach. You can call it a life coach. You could call it, enrolling in strategic coach. There's lots of different coaching programs. But having the discipline and accountability to carve out some time to do the work, to think about what's next.
Okay. That's pillar 1 on the personal side. What's pillar number 2?
Pillar 2 is wealth planning,
okay,
which is what we've done at True North for 25 years. And really the opportunity there is, whether it's from a philanthropic perspective, whether it's from an estate planning perspective, whether it's from a trying to get asset values out of your estate into the next generation in a tax efficient way, there are a lot of tools that you can utilize to improve your situation, your financial picture, but you've got to start that process well upstream. When you get a letter of intent from a buyer, the window's closed, right? You've missed a lot of opportunities. And if you have a fast appreciating business, there's a way to push some of that appreciation outside of your estate. So there's a lot of interesting things that you can do, but if you don't start that process 2 or 3 years ahead of time prior to the exit, you're not going to be able to take advantage of it. So wealth planning, that's what we do at True North all day, every day. So just trying to get out in front of the transaction, and that's our second pillar.
And our strong recommendation is at least 2 years prior to even the thought of a transaction. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think if you're 2 to 3 years out, that's plenty of time.
Yep.
The other challenge you're running against is, again, you're busy.
Yep.
The process takes multiple people. There's a tax, CPA, tax advisor. There's an estate planner. There's clearly your wealth advisor is, probably quarterbacking the process. The coordination of those people. There's lots of decisions to be made. I mean, if you're going to permanently remove assets from your estate, you want to think that through. That takes time to sort of sit on that. So you don't want to be rushed. So 2 to 3 years it should be enough time.
Okay. Those are the two pillars on the personal side. On the professional side, what's pillar number 3?
So on the professional side with the business, it's really about how do we get this business ready for a sale? So how do we do the things that make the business really attractive to a buyer, where the sales process goes well, where, so things like audited financial statements, right? If you don't have audited financial statements, the quality of earnings process and the due diligence process from the buyer is going to take a lot longer, and it's going to have a lot more scrutiny to it. Whereas if you have audited financials, there's a little bit of these guys have been running a legitimate, not having audited financials makes you illegitimate, but it's just a sniff test, right? Yep. And so all of those things help with the process. The other thing that you want to do is make sure that the business is as professionalized as it can be, as organized as it can be, as smooth as it can be. And so, we think about things like EOS, the Entrepreneurial Operating System, and EOS is not the only system. There's, Rockefeller Habits and Make Big Happen. There's multiple systems, but a lot of small businesses, again, because life is crazy and there's lots going on, and maybe you don't have all the infrastructure and all the people that you need. A lot of times there's not a good rhythm of, vision setting and vision casting and, measuring to core values and annual planning and quarterly goal setting and accountability and, a leadership team that's all aligned and on the same page. So how do we get some of those things in place? So again, when the buyer comes in, they look at this and they're like, wow, this is a well-oiled machine. Like this business runs really, really well. And so that's the third pillar is how do we help the business just run better, operate more efficiently. And in theory, it creates capacity for the business owner. If you think about the value of a business, if the value of the business is highly dependent on the founder, business owner, operator, if they're in every aspect of the business, it's not going to be worth as much. And so how do we begin to extract the business owner from the day-to-day by putting a leadership team in place, putting a strong, sort of second generation of leadership in, things that are highly dependent on the business owner? How do we replace the business owner before we start the process of thinking about an exit? Because the business will be more valuable. And, programs like EOS can help with that.
Pillar number 4 on the professional side.
So really pillar 4 is beginning to get into the valuation, right? So business is going to, based on the industry, based on the revenue, based on the EBITDA, based on, kind of the size of the company and the scale, is going to trade within a range from a multiple perspective. And so there's a low end of the range and there's a high end of the range. And so understanding where the business might trade today, and then where's the opportunity to improve upon the multiple that you might get at exit. So one of the interesting things about PTP, I'll back up for a second, is that True North is not the expert in all these areas. If you look at the 4 pillars, coaching, wealth planning, business organization and leadership, and then valuation, we're going to really be able to have the most impact on the wealth planning piece. We're going to bring in experts in these other areas. So with valuation, we're going to bring in an investment banker to help us think about that. A banker who's familiar with the industry, who knows where the multiples are, who knows, hey, if you can do these 2 or 3 things, we ought to be able to improve your exit. And so PTP is all about assembling a team around the business owner and entrepreneur, getting on the path to work on these things. Invariably, a particular business owner may have 1 or 2 of these things that they already do well. They may already be very clear about what the purpose is post-transaction. Don't need a lot of work there. They may have done 0 wealth planning. They may have a really good banker and may be really aware of where the multiple is and where they are in the range. But they need some work on their leadership team. So part of our role is to be the quarterback, to listen, to understand the needs, to sort of diagnose where they need help, assemble the team, and then help move the entrepreneur through that process over hopefully a couple of years as they approach an exit. So as we think about this process with PTP, we have these 4 pillars: coaching, wealth planning, business organization, and leadership and valuation. If you do a great job with 1, 2, and 3, number 4 kind of takes care of itself in reality, because you're doing all the work that really feeds the valuation ultimately. So that's something that I think a lot of times we get that backwards. We're like, how do we maximize the valuation? And we sort of go through this quantitative effort to try to engineer more EBITDA or whatever to get the valuation where it needs to be. And really, these other things, support a strong valuation. The other thing I would say is that, our purpose at True North is fulfilling lives. The whole reason we exist is to help our clients live a more fulfilled life. Oftentimes, an owner might think the answer is an exit because the business is running them. And, their idea in the beginning was, I'm going to start this business so I have control. Well, and then ultimately you wake up one day and the business is controlling you. So as part of this process, what would be a wonderful outcome is that we help the business owner get their business operating more efficiently. They get up above the business. It's not running them anymore. They're focused on things that are their unique ability, their giftedness. They actually are having more fun, more enjoyment because they've gotten clear on their purpose. They've got all their financial house in order. They've got an organization leadership system in place that really works, and the value of the business is going up every day. And they might wake up one day and go, wow, I'm actually doing what I wanted to do all along. I just sort of got wrapped up in this over time, and it kind of took over. And so a great outcome is that they don't exit, but they end up with, a better life, if you will, a more fulfilled life, because they are doing the thing that they love to do, and it's not running them. So that's a great outcome, and not necessarily, I think some would say, well, gosh, if you're putting someone in this process, the goal is to exit. Not necessarily.
I know part of our passion at True North for PTP is a recent study that came out about business owners. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so when I was doing the research and becoming more educated about this, again, I'd observed in real time, in real life, watching entrepreneurs struggle. I hadn't done a lot of studying on why, and went through this coursework, and the Exit Planning Institute had done a study a number of years ago, and the study basically says that 75% of all business owners and entrepreneurs profoundly regret, or the words they use in the study, profoundly regret selling their business 12 to 18 months post-transaction. And you're like, holy cow, how can that be? Because that's sort of you would think that's the goal, right? I build this great business, it's worth a lot of money, I sell it, I have this big pile of money in an account, and life is great. But yet 75% profoundly regret selling their business, and there's a host of reasons why.
Once you understood that statistic, how did that impact us forming this PTP process?
Right, so I think as you start to look at the statistic, there's a number of reasons why that's the case, and we'd even observed with our own clients and business owners sort of different reasons, why they were unhappy. or had regret. Some of it was they didn't know what they were going to move on to. Mm-hmm. They maybe didn't maximize their exit, or the timing of the exit wasn't great. Maybe they didn't maximize the exit because they didn't have the business really wasn't as great as it could have been. Mm-hmm. Maybe they hadn't done all the things with their wealth planning that they should have. And so that really informed the creation of the 4 pillars: the coaching pillar, the wealth planning pillar, the business organization and leadership pillar, and the valuation pillar.